Can we just, like, you know, rent a car, check into a hotel, and leave the kids with your parents, order some room service, a bottle of champagne? What do you say?
You're on the top.
Well, you look really familiar to me.
I get that a lot. I've been on TV.
Yeah, me too.
House is open.
Everyone's in position. How's the weather?
We've got flurries all along the Virginia coast. New storm front coming in from the northeast.
Hey! Restricted area. Need some ID.
Sure. No problem.
Listen, you're not pissing in somebody's pool, are you?
Yeah, fresh out of chlorine.
What?
Shut it down.
Jesus Christ. Any attempt to restore your systems will be met by severe penalties.
Life's plane. They're gonna run out of fuel in 90 minutes.
Shit!
We are just up to our ass in turns again, Jack. Freedom. Not yet. Okay.
So what?
Elvis. Elvis Presley.
Die Hard 2 Die Harder was the sequel to the 1988 original. Released 2 years after Die Hard, the movie was helmed by Finnish director Renny Harlin. This was his first big studio feature, only having previously directed A Nightmare on Elm Street 4, The Dream Master for New Line Cinema. The original Die Hard director John McTiernan was set to come back as director, but he was already attached to The Hunt for the Red October starring Sean Connery. Like the original Die Hard, this film is based on a novel by Walter Wagner titled 58 Minutes. Stephen E. Souza again writes the script, this time with Doug Richardson as opposed to Jeb Stewart. Die Hard 2 was barely finished to make its June 29th release date. Renny Harlin was given a budget of around $70 million and the movie recouped nearly $120 million. So all in, it was a successful movie and made a profit. However, due to its larger budget compared to the original movie, it maybe didn't do as well as Fox had hoped. Renny Harlin nevertheless utilised the budget well, giving audiences some fantastic popcorn entertainment. The movie unites many of the original cast members. Obviously Bruce Willis is back as kick-ass Lieutenant John McClane, Reginald Val Johnson as Sergeant Powell and friend of John returns, Bonnie Bedilia played Holly McClane, and finally we have William Atherton again playing slimy reporter Richard Thornburg. The story begins at Dulles International Airport. McClane is waiting for his wife Holly to arrive from LA, where we see she still works for the Nakatomi Plaza Corporation. We see John's car is being towed by airport police officer Vito Lorenzo, played by Robert Costanzo. Heading inside, John's pager keeps buzzing. It's here we're introduced to Colonel Stewart and his tight man buns. It's established he enjoys exhibitionism and fancies himself as Bruce Lee's successor. After his oiled up workout, he meets up with the rest of his cronies. This time not played by wannabe Germans, but all Americans. Some faces you will recognise, such as John Leguizamo and even Robert Patrick before he came Liquid Jelly. John has some chit chat with Holly, but the main thing we establish is that she's in the air and supposedly going to be landing in 30 minutes. Right. So while having another smoke, John's cop's eyes noticed 3 hooligans playing footsie under the table and tries to alert security to no avail. as obviously it's the cop who just towed John's mother-in-law's car. He does more snooping than Snoopy and discovers two bad guys hanging around the baggage area. We have our typical die-hard shootout here, and one of the thugs, Cochrane, yeah, enter your innuendos below, gets rolled out like a pizza at Pizza Hut. John gives chase to the other goon, but the thug escapes and John is held at gunpoint by the officers full 6 inches. It's here we're introduced to Chief Officer Lorenzo, played by Dennis Franz. He's obviously going to be our Dwayne T. Robinson in this picture, and is continually an annoyance in John's arse like a bad case of piles. Sneakily, however, John fingerprints the corpse of Cochrane and sends the prints to ally and friend Al Powell in LA, who has a brief but more than welcoming cameo. The two exchange some witty dialogue, and Al runs the prints for any possible matches. Meanwhile, our bad guys have seized control of a church located at the end of the airport's main runway and have begun setting up their base of operations. So Al phones John and explains that the cocky Cochrane has apparently been dead for years. This raises John's holy shit-o-meter to level 10, and he heads to the airport's control tower to explain the situation to Mr. Trudeau, played by Fred Thompson, and engineer Leslie Barnes, played by R. Evans. Captain Lorenzo is there, of course, to dismiss John's concerns, but credit to the writers here, Trudeau does put Lorenzo on alert and asks him to report any suspicious activity around the airport. Suddenly, all the airport's runway go dark, and landing is impossible. Bruce Lee knockoff Colonel Stewart phones the tower to stake his demands. In short, a cocaine-dealing dictator is arriving soon, and Stewart wants to spring him due to his own political beliefs, as well as a shit ton of money, obviously. He explains that failures to comply with his demands will be met with serious penalties, so Lorenzo pulls rank and John is thrown out of the control tower. So John escapes via the elevator roof and descends to the airport's basement, where he meets Marvin, the janitor. John uses Marvin to find his way to the airport's backup terminal, the Annex Skywalk. Lorenzo sends his best SWAT team there with Chief Engineer Barnes to try to communicate with the planes above and let them know of the situation. However, obviously, Stewart's men are there and all but Barnes are killed. John arrives and fills the T-1000 with holes that won't heal and disposes of the bad guys in quick time. However, the antennae dish was rigged and blows up. Stewart, now pissed, shows John his ace card for failing to listen and decides to crash a British-bound plane flown by Cole Meany. Futile attempts by John to warn the plane fail and all on board are killed. Tricky Dicky and Holly exchange some words on board their flight meanwhile, and she suggests that maybe his mouthwash ain't making the cut. But they also recognise that numerous planes nearby are circulating the airport, which also raises some concerns. Down on the ground, Trudeau has contacted the military and they send in a Special Forces Commando unit led by Major Grant, played by John Amos. Again, John is excluded from the operations, so he heads back to Marvin to find out which runway the corrupt dictator's plane is landing on. Leslie Barnes at this point has also managed to use a homing beacon signal to communicate audibly with the planes above to warn them of the dangers on the ground. So John heads out to the runway to intercept Esperanza's plane, played by Franco Nero, and apprehends him. Stewart and his men arrive by this point and trap John in the cockpit of the plane, throwing in grenades inside. He narrowly avoids death by ejecting out of the plane before it explodes. Barnes explains to John that he thinks the bad guys must be at a close location as they got to the runway pretty quick to pick up their prize. This guess turns out to be right. After John fights and kills a heavy, the commando team arrives and a gun battle ensues. Stewart and his men escape via the back door on snowmobiles. John commandeers one and chases them down. The chase is pretty run-of-the-mill and not that exciting, and ends with McClane thrown down a ditch after his snowmobile explodes. So it's here we have our final showdown with John McClane and the bad guys. He fights Major Grant and gives him the best sucking he's had in his life before duking it out with Bruce Lee. I mean Colonel Stewart and his Mr. Miyagi karate moves. McClane is soon overpowered and kicked off the plane's wing by opening the wing's fuel valve before he falls. Stewart heads inside and the gang seem to be off, but a fire trail McClane has just lit behind the plane explodes it into a million pieces, killing all on board, but also creating a convenient landing marker for the planes to touch down on. John finds and finally picks up his other half. The parking ticket he received earlier in the movie is ripped up because thank God for that. I mean, that's the main thing. And Marv drives them off in a very similar fashion to Argyle in the original movie to enjoy the holidays, and the movie ends with the classic Die Hard Christmas music. And that's our review of Die Hard 2. The movie for me personally is a mixed bag. It's strange because it has all the classic Die Hard elements, such as violence, big action sequences, Bruce Willis, and even bringing some of the original cast members back. So theoretically this should have been just as good, if not better, than the original. But somewhere along the line it falls short. Bruce Willis has said himself that this is his personal weakest of the Die Hard movies. While I wouldn't rank it that low, as I feel there's worse movies in the series, such as, you know, Die Hard 4 and definitely Die Hard 5. There's just something about this movie that just doesn't keep me engaged. I seem to lose interest sort of around the middle mark, you know. It just never picks up off the ground. There's one major presence missing in this movie, and that's obviously the great villain. Alan Rickman's performance as Hans Gruber, everybody knows, is just an absolute classic and a joy to watch. Colonel Stewart, William Sadler's character, and John Amos, and, you know, the drug dictator, they're acted well and the dialogue's okay for them, but they're just not engaging. They just don't keep your attention, you know, like Gruber did. Gruber was sophisticated, he was evil, he was intelligent, whereas these guys ain't. They just don't, they pale in comparison to Alan Rickman. Sorry, but, you know, good job guys, but, you know, you're no Alan Rickman, you're no Gruber. And also I even think something as small as the German accents, you know, I mean, we laughed at Alan Rickman's bad German accent, but that was part of its charm. Alan Rickman couldn't speak German for shit, but, you know, hell, we could ignore that and we enjoyed it. Also, I feel scoping the movie up, taking the movie from a building and putting it into an airport, it seems the logical thing to do for a movie sequel, because you have to go bigger, you have to exceed the audience's expectations. But again, that was part of the charm that the original had. You were in a building, you know, we've all been in buildings, we all can relate to that environment. Okay, yes, while most of us have been in airports, it just sort of lost its charm, you know. Like I said, the action sequences are really well done by Renny Harlin, so credit where it's due. The digital effects, this time not handled by Boss Films, they're handled by ILM, do just as fantastic job. You know, they're very believable and haven't really dated that badly. But I don't know, there's just something about this movie that I personally don't gel with. I'll watch it when it's on. However, yeah, it's just there. It's just there. It's just a Die Hard film. Not the best, but certainly not the worst. I think the worst is yet to come. But by all means, guys, check it out, because, you know, the first, the second, and the third for me are the trilogy. There's no other Die Hard movie after that. 4 was complete garbage, being rated, you know, not an 18. And Die Hard 5, I haven't seen it, but the reviews speak for themselves. So yeah, check this one out, Die Hard 2 by Renny Harlin, and starring Bruce Willis. Not a bad movie, but certainly not the best in the series, that's for sure. But I would say a worthy follow-up, and an entry into the Die Hard series. So check it out, guys, give it a watch. I hope you enjoyed the review again. If you like these videos, comment, rate and subscribe. and I will see you on the next review. Yippee-ki-yay, motherfuckers.